I get to take us into our next message in the What If series. And I'll say again, if this is your first time with us, welcome. We're so glad to have you if you're new to 828. And we are in a series that essentially is just asking a forward-thinking question, like, what if? What if I really trusted God? What if I really applied grace? I think that trust word's still coming. You're going to get that one. But what if I really put my hope in who He is? What if? You know, just considering with all that's going on in the world, what if we make these choices? Because that could be a game changer. I believe always is and will be. It's not a what if I hadn't made that mistake. We're not looking back. We're looking forward. And there's a lot ahead of us. Come on, somebody. A lot of good things. Can I just speak that to you this morning? God's got big ideas about you. Okay, so I know about the rearview mirror, but they only have nominal value. You know, we're trying to live through the windshield here at 828 Church. We've been saying that from our Genesis. We believe in that. And sure, we want to learn from the past, but I believe God's got big ideas about you. I also know this, though. There's some difficulty ahead. That's a real part of life, too. None of us are immune to the reality that at times we face the rain, right? It comes. I mean, it's a part of what happens. And boy, lately here in Wilmington, for those of you who are watching from farther away, this may or may not be true for you, but certainly it's been true here. Whew, man, I mean, it's like almost every day we get a little bit of a storm or some rain. I'm not complaining. I don't know where you land on that, but the grass outside both our locations was essentially brown 5 or 6 weeks ago. It's green again. I mean, you mow it on Thursday, it looks like it needs it again by Sunday. I mean, but I am not complaining about a bit of rain, because rain can be a blessing too. But storms, you know, and I am from the Midwest. Karen and I, both, my wife and I, she's in kids this morning, but we're from the Midwest. We lived in what we would at least consider a side alley to Tornado Alley. So we saw a lot of those. The thing about a tornado is it just, whew, I mean, you know, okay, they might put out a forecast to say, okay, you know, over the next couple of days, it's going to be tornadic. That's the word they use. Tornadic weather, meaning it has the potential to create. And then when it gets really bad, they put out a tornado watch. Maybe you feel like somehow in your life right now, there's a little bit of a tornado watch because, you know, some other people's choices and stuff are likely to affect you. And, you know, man, any minute something could get really hectic. Come on. And some of you feel that because just of a season of life you're in, you know. I just had a reminder from a couple of years ago when my mom went to be with Jesus, and just all the, you know, just thinking through some of the emotion of that, and those things can happen, and then, you know, then they got this thing they call a flash flood. You know, floods, man, that's one thing, but a flash flood, that means it came quick. You know, you weren't planning on it, and then there it was, right? Anybody? Around here, we get hurricanes. Now, you got to get a bit of warning about those. Are y'all following my preaching? I'm actually preaching. This is not even just a weather report. Because sometimes you see it coming, but it's still going to be a lot when it gets there. You know it's coming. You try to prepare for it. And those kinds of some of the things that we face in life, we get stormy weather. This, incidentally, the message that I'll share today, I'm coming from Mathew chapter 7. And it's a message, I believe this would be the 5th time I've shared some rendition of this teach here at 828 Church since we launched now 7 heading toward 8 years ago. Excuse me. Because I think it's one of the most powerful truths that Jesus shared with us while he was on earth. But when I think about all of the different difficulties we can deal with, just life storms, you know, I always use examples like when it is a death. And even if so we have people in this house who have hurt deeply and still do because of losing someone suddenly. And I feel that, and I pray for you and pray for them. And then there are other instances when you knew you were about to lose someone. Still, when someone is no longer here and they step into eternity, that's always sudden, by the way. Or that diagnosis maybe you yourself got. And for some of us, that doesn't have to be, you know, a terminal illness, but you just realize, wow, this is something, bar some miraculous healing, which can happen, by the way. You know, this is probably something I'm going to deal with for a long time in my life. And those things, they're storms. Come on. I know y'all feel me right now. I'm preaching real. Is that all right? Because that's real. Those things really happen. They've happened to some of you in this house this year, and it just comes, man, and it can be difficult. Sometimes it's a lost job. You thought it was good, but it wasn't, you know, or a lost relationship. That's happened to a lot of people lately. And then those inexplicable feelings of emptiness that can come from nowhere and you don't know why. and that's still a storm. Storms come. It was Henry Wadsworth Longfellow who said, "Be still, sad heart, and cease repining. Behind the clouds the sun's still shining. Your fate is the common fate of all. Into each life some rain must fall." Yeah, he has a good poet name, by the way. You know, I've been writing a lot of poetry. I do not have a good poet name. I've been thinking about that a little bit. If you want to help me find, like, what is those, like, when you have a name, it's not your name? I don't know what was that? A pen name. I need a good pen name. Everybody help me out. Because Ron Barnard. I don't feel like that inspires people to want to read my poetry. Sounds more like a comedian's name to me. I don't know why. I digress. But it's true. Into every life a little rain must fall. And Jesus, after an incredible teaching, I referenced it last week, we call it the Sermon on the Mount. And David, he laid out some truth. And then after that, he said this: "Everyone who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock." Let me pose a question, because that's what I'm supposed to do right now. I know that the weather is unpredictable and often even stormy. But what if we built on the rock? Then could we handle the storm? Even it wouldn't make the storm not come. But then would the result of the storm be different in terms of how it impacts our lives? Would it still have impact? Absolutely. Would we still rather wish that it hadn't come? For sure. But here's what he went on to say, verse 25. And then, so everyone who hears these words of mine and does them is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And then the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against the house. But it did not fall, because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain, look, did you see that? Well, look what happened to both guys. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell. And great was the fall of it. I've always said, for me, like the way that I live into my life, man, if I fall hard. You know what I'm saying? Like I know, and this is true for all of us, but I have this sense that I need to be really diligent about building on the rock. Like this, for me, has to be a really intentional choice. And it's not just a once-off choice. Like it's an everyday deciding to apply the truth of God's word to who I am and how I'm going to live and how I'm going to act and how I'm going to interact. And I submit to you that the difference that makes is incalculable. They don't make calculators for that. You can't measure it. It's enormous. And there's a song that I try to sing for you occasionally. I'm not sure if you like it, but so far so good for not telling me, please don't ever do that again. I do appreciate it. But it makes this point so incredibly. But it's just a song called Two Sets of Joneses, and it goes like this. This is a song about two sets of Joneses. Rothschild, Evelyn, Reuben, and Sue. Just for discussion through random selection, we've chosen two couples who haven't a clue. Rothschild was lucky to marry so wealthy. Evelyn bought him a house on the beach. Reuben and Sue, they had nothing but Jesus. And at night they would pray that he'd care for them each. And the rains came down, and they blew the four walls down. And the clouds, they rolled away. One set of Joneses was standing that day. Evelyn's daddy was proud of the young Rothschild. He worked the late hours to be number one. Just newlyweds and their marriage got rocky. He's flying to Dallas. She's having a son. Reuben was holding a Gideon's Bible. He screamed, "It's a boy," so that everyone heard. The guys at the factory took a collection. Again, God provided for the bills they'd incurred. And the rains came down, and they blew the four walls down, and the clouds, they rolled away. One set of Joneses was standing that day. So what is the point of this story? And what am I trying to say? Is your life built on the rock of Christ Jesus or a sandy foundation you've managed to lay? Well, needless to say, Evelyn left her husband. She sued him for every penny he had. I truly wish that those two would find Jesus before things get worse than they already have. And the rains came down, and they blew the four walls down, and the clouds, they rolled away. And one set of Joneses was standing that day. La-di-di, 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 die. That's actually how the song ends. It's a true story. You know, there's a big bit of this that we don't get to choose. The rain's coming. I mean, the most common reality in this story for both builders was that the rain came, and we can't control the rain, but we get to decide where we're going to build. So, I have 4 quick tips for us this morning from this passage. I mean, this is a super easy passage to exposit. And the first is just this: quick tips for building a house that will stand. Number 1, material matters. Again, Brandon, if you back up, before Jesus said this, he had been preaching for a minute. I mean, some of the truth that he unpacked, things like blessed are, he went through the Beatitudes, we call them. You know, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the meek. And he just unpacked all these amazing truths. And then he talked a lot about anger and how caustic anger is for your soul and relationships. And he talked about lust. And certainly the pride of life was a part of that. But just how when we give ourselves what our flesh wants, how destructive it is for our spirits and for our souls. And he talked about turning the other cheek and loving your enemies and generosity. What a life-giving choice that is to make. And he set a bit of teaching in place about how to pray. And then one of my favorites, Matthew 6:33, he said, to store up for yourselves treasures on earth. Or I'm sorry, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, but in heaven. Yeah, that's wrong. Right? It was an important teaching. Store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, but not on earth. He was teaching incredible truth that we all need to hear and apply to our lives. He talked about the golden rule and don't judge and don't be anxious and enter through the narrow gate, not the wide way. And he talked about how trees have fruit. And one of the hardest truths that he unpacks just before he gives this message about this parable or story about the wise man building and the foolish man building, just before that, he literally shares a bit about an unsaved Christian. Someone who feigns a walk in relationship with God but doesn't actually live it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it was tough. It was tough teaching. And then after all that teaching, just for some context, he said, now everyone who hears these words of mine and does them. See, there it is, right? This is where that Ron quote comes in. Your walk talks, right? Your talk talks, but your walk talks louder than your talk talks. I mean, what you do is who you are. And I know on a lot of levels we could say that that's not so, because certainly you're not defined by what you've done. So don't mishear me in that moment. You are a son and a daughter. You're a priest and a king. That's who God made you to be. So don't be defined in that sense by your doing. But what I'm saying is that when you are who God made you to be, you'll do the things God calls you to do. Let me give it to you this way. James 1:22, be. So it starts with being. And then in your being, be a doer. Be a doer of what? That's it. Be a doer of the word and not a hearer only. The whole point, the takeaway for us this morning, the whole point of the parable is that God's truth must be lived, not just learned. I mean, at the end of it, that's where we're going, right? We're going to that place where what we've learned, we learn to live. Everyone who hears and does. I know that's tough teaching, but it's true. What you build your life out of is a really big deal. Material matters. When you're building a house, when you're building a physical house, the material is a big deal. Did you know that they're now building what they call hurricane houses? Some companies are building hurricane houses. And come on, Rodney, they've had some houses that have made it through some pretty big storms. So they have pictures of these houses next to other houses that were just like destroyed. And I'm not saying to you that I actually believe in the physical sense that even a hurricane house is maybe going to withstand every kind of hurricane, or certainly a tornado if it happened to spin one up. But I am impressed. And what do? They just use better material. You know what I'm saying? Like they plywooden that thing up, and they're using extra heavy and more 2x4s, and they're creating the kind of house that can handle wind. And I'm just saying that from a spiritual perspective. From an earthly perspective, I'm not sure how faithfully that can be done, but it can be done better. But we're not talking about better, somebody. I'm talking about when you build out of the stuff that God gives us to build out of, you can handle the storm. Not you might can handle the storm. Not you might can handle the wind or the weight of what comes your way. And I'm not saying that will make it easy, but I'm saying you will still be standing when all is said and done. But what you build out of matters. You know, they also actually build houses out of junk. You may have seen this. You seen some of those? Google that. Now, that can actually be, again, from an earthly perspective, there's some spaces in Western Zambia. They take what would otherwise be considered rubbish, especially plastic bottles and stuff, and they'll put it inside of what will become a mud-covered wall so that it provides more insulation. So that's pretty smart. But I'm just saying, I don't want to build my house out of trash, everybody. You know, and there are some things that people are building out of that are not stout or strong. And it don't last. I was thinking about that in regard. I mean, I'm recycling can be cool. I'm sure everybody that knows me well wishes I'd be a bit better at it. But recycling some things to make a house, maybe, you know, is okay, I guess. It could be good. But I'm just saying, don't recycle your hurt and your past history and try to make a house for your heart. That's what I was trying to say. I feel like I just got that said. Whew. I was worried about myself there for a minute. Think about the 3 little pigs. You know what I'm saying? And one guy, I don't know what he was thinking, build a house out of straw. Right? That was a bad idea. The other guy said, well, sticks is an upgrade, but bricks, people, bricks. Another takeaway for us is this: you can't build your house out of garbage and wonder why it stinks. That's us a lot of times. We're like, why does my life stink? What are you building out of? Did you get that idea from scrolling a news feed? Or did you find it in the Word? Material matters. Well, I read in this book. Which book? When you know you're struggling a little bit to make a point. When you get to it, then you take some dramatic pauses because you're like, okay, I probably was confusing there for a quick minute, but I want everybody to get that. Material matters. Number 2, where you build is a big deal, right? I put that in the notes in this way: location is critical. Now, that's really obviously the title of the message, but like everyone who hears these words and does them is like a wise man who built his house on a rock. Location is critical. I mean, again, these points are overlapping for sure. This is kind of a one-point message that I'm unpacking in actuality. But where you build is a really big deal. And we have an opportunity. So in that case, we're not even just building on his truth, but Jesus himself is the rock. Like the rock is our relationship with a living God. It's not even just instruction, but it is life with the instructor. You understand what I'm saying? Like, don't even just try to learn the truth and build with it yourself, but believe that you are living into who God made you because you are living into a relationship with Jesus. And you know, I find this to consistently be true. I know some people who know very little of God's word and in fact have very little access to it. We're going to be hanging out with some of them just now, but they have a relationship and they are building on the rock. And I know some other people that know the Bible front and back, but are not building on the rock or even in reality building with the truth. Y'all hear what I'm saying right now? Location is critical. It was the British real estate agent Harold Samuel who said there are actually, when it comes to real estate, there are 3 things to remember. And we have some of the best realtors in this area in our church. But three things he said to remember. The first one is location. And the second one is location. And the third one, location. You don't need me to tell you that. If you've ever rented a vacation home anywhere on the coast. You're like, well, this ain't much of a house, but I got a view. Come on. I mean, it's about location, and location in regards to our heart is critical. When I shared from this passage about a year and a half ago that we had just seen where literally a house disappeared overnight in the Outer Banks. That happens quite a bit up there, by the way. There's several houses out there that are, man, I mean, I want to rent them, but not in the rain, right? Everybody? And I love the Outer Banks, by the way. I think it's spectacular. But spiritually speaking, I don't want to build my house on anything but the rock. And the truth is, and this is what's sad, is that when the rain comes, we just get so upset. Like, we're just like, what in the world? How are these, we've built in a place that's without a solid or firm foundation. Some of us today, what we need to be praying about is, Lord, what do you want to do with the foundation of my life? That would be the prayer to pray. God, where have I built on sand? Like, what is it that I'm trusting in or counting on or hoping for that isn't you? And you got to say, okay, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm going to pull that out of my foundation. I'm going to get some rock in here, right? We got some foundational issues. Some of us, if we're honest, I had a friend in Southern Africa, well, he was in South Africa, that I used to go preach for a lot in a place called Fundabale Park. It's a pretty interesting name, Fundabale Park. And they also had a second location in a place called Vereniken. Yeah, try to spell that, I dare you. But when I would go stay with them, they had a room for Uncle Ron because they had kids. So I had my own room. But my room was doing this, man. Like, your bag would roll across the room. They had some serious foundation issues there. Their house, and they eventually sold that. Somebody had to reconstruct it. They had to dig it up because they didn't pour any footings, and it was built on sand, and it was just, come on. And some of us were like, hey, what's happening over here? And this part of my life is falling apart. What are you built on? Another takeaway for us is this. You can't build a house on the sand and be angry at the ocean. And we are a lot. We're like, this is so unfair. What are you built on? You're angry at the ocean. I feel like those folks in the Outer Banks, they don't have that attitude. They knew when they bought it. The ocean is probably going to come back and get this piece of territory at some point. On Christ the solid rock I stand. All other ground is sinking sand. All other ground is sinking sand. If I'd known you were going to sing, I'd have stayed home today. I know I'm a little bit hoarse too. A third tip for building a house that will last is to understand that persistence is powerful. What I mean by that, keep building. Keep building. I know some of you are thinking, man, I'm trying, right? I'm trying to build on the rock. I'm trying to build out of truth. But I am still struggling every time it rains. Every time it rains, I'm like, man, I'm all wet. Keep building. Come on, look at your neighbor and say, keep building. Come on over there south, elbow somebody online. Shout across the room, right? Keep building. There's a few folks sitting in here that don't have anybody to elbow. I feel bad for them. Just look across the way, okay? This is a virtual elbow. Come on, keep building. I kind of want to channel Kenzie Knaus's. I work directly with her on our stuff in Southern Africa, and she's like an assistant to me here. And she always says, you're doing great. I want to channel my inner Kenzie right now. You're doing better than you think. Come on, keep building. When I was back in the day, I had a friend who started a house, and they got it. They got it framed in, and they had some foundation poured, which was good. And they got that first inner board that you put, sometimes it's blue or black, and it's kind of this soft board that they use on the outside of the 2x4s, and then they're going to put the outer covering on it, and they never got past that inner board. I mean, they built a brand new house, but they didn't finish it. And eventually they couldn't live in it anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like it don't work. It doesn't work well. Here's another takeaway for us. You can't build a house without a roof and be angry at the rain. That's us too. We're just like upset. Like, it's raining. Yeah, it's raining. It's supposed to rain. It's going to rain, everybody. Hebrews 12:2. Ricky, I've actually mentioned this verse. I believe this is the 5th or 6th week in a row I've mentioned this verse. Hebrews says this: look to Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. Did you see that word? Remember what Paul said about his own life? He said, I have finished, fought a good fight, kept the faith, finished. Finished. Keep building. And then lastly, 4 tips on building a house that will last. Choose the right builder. It's a big deal. And you're not it, by the way. You're not it. I'm the captain of my own fate. I said last week, you mean the captain of your own folly. Resign your title, sovereign of the universe, and give that job back to God. Y'all don't even know I could preach in chill mode. What about that? Choose the right builder. Who do you think it is? How obvious am I this morning? Who do you think it is? Who knows? Who has the design and the blueprint for you? Yeah, I hear a lot of Jesus, 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 Jesus. It's like an echo. Jesus, 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 Jesus. I'll just keep asking because I'm loving how we're filling the house with the name of the Lord. Use the right builder. Builders fascinate me too, man. I mean, guys that can see it and build it. Adam Villaruel's in the house right now. I mean, the dude is talented. Chad Bowie, one of our builders in the house. John Fedorenko can build. Jacob, who is playing drums at South today. A lot of the stuff you see here, you know, man, I build stuff. I'm the son. Well, obviously my Lord and Savior is the son of a carpenter. I'll come to that in a minute. But my dad was a carpenter, right? Not a Jewish carpenter, but nonetheless, a carpenter. And I can build stuff, but I don't really believe in using squares and things like that. I mean, you're not wanting to hire me. You don't even want me building it for free, Jason. I like to take the scraps and make airplanes for the kids to play with, you know, but watch out for that nail. That's the thing. It was a wheel. It was fun. Yeah. Not just anybody can build. Not build well. Not build to last. Everybody can grab a hammer and a nail. We were putting together picnic tables a couple of years ago for, I wish I had brought this picture. We were putting together picnic tables for a whole group of folks that came over to our house for Easter. And myself and McKinley and Judah were putting them together. And I can put together a picnic table. Don't underestimate me that much, everybody. But Judah was back there, and he had the directions for putting together these picnic tables. And I'm not particularly interested in directions, which is another reason you don't want me to be your builder. And he's holding these directions. And he says, Papa, I think we should look at the constructions. That's what he called them. He was holding them upside down, but he does not read right. I also believe we should look at the constructions, but I think we should actually lean on the constructor. I know I'm over making this point, but I'm going to ride it out. Because a lot of times what we say, we get to a point in our lives and we're frustrated and we say, I built this with my own 2 hands. And we're frustrated. It's not working. I put a lot of effort in. You know, maybe I got educated in this area, or I gave all this effort to this relationship or marriage or whatever it is. I built this with my own 2 hands. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Then the rains came and the winds blew. You're like, man, this is not ready for this. And the best architect and builder is obviously Jesus. And his adopted dad, or his earthly dad, was a carpenter. Psalm 127:1, unless the Lord builds a house, the work of the builders is wasted. Come and join me, David. We'll lay in this. Worship team here and at South, y'all can get ready. I'll call you up in just a minute. A takeaway for us is this: Jesus came as the Jesus came as the Messiah in the manger and as a master builder with a blueprint and a hard hat. Yeah, the same guy. The baby in the manger. Come on, the Messiah. If you hadn't had Christmas in July yet, it's not my fault, because you should have had. Right? But the Messiah in the manger came as a master builder with a blueprint and a hard hat, and what he builds is people, lives, and relationships that can handle the storms. We don't have to turn to something else or give in to some, flesh pattern that's going to actually destroy or erode the foundation or what we've been busy building. Not when we trust in Jesus. A master builder is someone who assumes overall responsibility for design and construction. And then here's one of two last takeaways, and in many cases, I would say the big takeaway of the day: you can't build a life without the Lord and expect it to last. Yeah. You can't. You can't build a life without the Lord. 3 of the 4 Gospels tell the story of Jesus asking his disciples, his followers, a question. And there was a lot going on, and there were people that were trying to figure out, who is this guy? Like, he is powerful. He's a rabbi. He's a prophet. Maybe he's one of the prophets of old. They were trying to figure it out. Like, who is he? He's Elijah. They just had all these ideas. I'm sure they were pitching out there. And Jesus asked them, he said, who do men say that I am? And they gave him a list, of the different misconceptions people had. And then he asked them this question, because this is the real question, Chris. He said, but who do you say? Oh, there it is. Who do you say that I am? And Peter said, you're Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God. Which stipulated Messiah. That's what he meant. That's who you are, that guy. Like, at this point, I got goosebumps. You're Jesus Christ. Let me tell you something about Jesus. Let me tell you about my Jesus. Okay, that's a song we're singing later, but he's a real deal. And he's a master builder. He's good at new constructions and reconstructions. He does it all, start to finish. And he is not a master builder, he is the. Everybody, there's only one. What if we get to choose this? I feel like I'm under preaching this point. What if we built on the rock? Stop already. Stop already. Stop already. Pulling the truth from so many different places, grabbing material and trying to throw it on and make it look good. Stop it. Stop it. Stop trusting information from unreliable sources. Stop. Dig into God's word and who God is, and don't worry about what everybody else in the world is thinking. Build yourself a house on the rock. Maybe you could save a few folk floating by. Hallelujah. That'd be good too, wouldn't it? Over here. I ain't judging you. I was down there too. Over here. Let me help you. You know what Jesus said in retort to what Peter said? That's right, Peter. I am Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God. And upon this rock, I'll build my church. And the gates of hell won't prevail against it. Last takeaway, believing in who Jesus is. Come on, worship team. Sorry, I should have asked you out. Here in Wilmington, South, y'all go ahead. How about that band over there today? Both places, man, we are blessed. What a worship team. Last takeaway, believing in who Jesus is and what he can do changes everything about how life lives. The wise man built his house on the rock. For me, I was thinking about this last night, Angie, just thinking, even as we prepare to head to Southern Africa tomorrow. And I have seen people who had no history with him that we could have quantified, but clearly God had been working. I've met people in the bush who were ready, right? Because God is always, it was Solomon, many would consider the wisest man of all time, who said he's put eternity in their hearts. Listen, God's always put that in us. And there's a draw. And here's the thing for me. I think building on the rock is choosing Jesus and what he wants above all else. And then when I do, as I said this last week, when we put him first. Last week's word, what if we put God first? When we do, God takes care of all the rest of it. Then we're who we're made to be for our family and for our friends. They don't get less, they get more. They get health and wholeness and a house or a life. It's built on the rock. Yeah, I do have a poem. I built it with my own two hands, with my own big plans. And in retrospect, there's no great wonder why it didn't work out. There was no consultation about material or location, and the builders that I modeled had no construction clout. No concern about foundation or potential situations that would surely one day come and put my construction to the test. Would it crumble in a storm? Could it stand if wind's the norm? Would it matter to the weather if I had done my best? Of course, the answer we can see, it's the same for you and me. Without Jesus, we're no good at the life we're meant to live. Without truth, we're without hope. Without a healthy way to cope, we wreck the very life that God has given us to live, or was good enough to give. Turns out, in life as in construction, the key to follow the instruction of the master and the builder who holds the blueprint in his hand. He builds a life that's made to last, so when the storms of life have passed, you'll be standing on the rock, not sinking in the sand. Jesus, help that truth settle into our hearts today. And I pray, God, we would again go on a journey, and maybe for the first time, a journey where we choose to build on who you are and what you say to us about who we're meant and made to be. God, I pray we wouldn't get lost in just trying to do better, but that we would be who you made us to be, and that would change the choices we make regarding how we live. Lord, and I pray for those right now who are in a storm. Some, God, maybe not in the eye of the storm anymore, or in those eye wall winds, but still feeling the residual effects of a storm that's come through, and maybe some today facing the brunt of it even still. Whatever that feels like, whatever that weight is, God, I pray you would help us to hold strong in the truth of who you are. Knowing, God, that you've got us. And when you build, what you build will last.